A small-town guy finds a lost woman in the woods. She turns out to be a millionaire. Escaping. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. Asterisk. The small town of Willow Creek was known for its scenic beauty, rolling hills, and the dense woods that surrounded it. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, and secrets were hard to keep. But on one fateful evening, the calm of the town would be shaken by a strange encounter deep in the woods. It was a late afternoon when Jack Turner, a local mechanic, was finishing up his work for the day. He had just closed his small shop for the night and was walking toward his truck when he noticed something unusual. The dense trees on the edge of the forest seemed to stir, as if they were hiding something. Intrigued, Jack decided to investigate. He grabbed his jacket and headed into the woods, not knowing that this decision would change his life forever. As he ventured deeper into the forest, he heard soft rustling ahead. He pushed aside a branch and froze. There, lying on the forest floor, was a woman. Her clothes were torn, her hair tangled with dirt, and her face pale with exhaustion. She looked like she had been lost in the woods for days. Jack rushed over to her, kneeling down beside her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. The woman looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear. I don't know," she whispered, barely able to speak. "I've been running from them." Her voice trailed off, and Jack could sense the panic in her words. Without hesitation, Jack helped her to her feet. "You're safe now," he reassured her, though he was unsure of what she meant by them. "What happened? How did you end up here?" he asked as they began to make their way back toward his truck. The woman hesitated for a moment, clearly struggling with whether or not to trust him. She finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I'm not who you think I am. I'm not just a lost woman. I'm running from something much bigger." Jack could feel the weight of her words, but he didn't push her. Instead, he focused on getting her to safety. As they reached the edge of the woods, the woman seemed to relax slightly. Jack helped her into his truck, and as they drove back to town, he couldn't help but wonder who this woman really was. She clearly wasn't just a random stranger. There was something more to her story, something Jack was determined to uncover. Little did he know, the truth about her would shake him to his core. What he thought would be a simple act of kindness was about to lead him into a world he never could have imagined. The woman, exhausted and fragile, looked out the window, the faint glow of the town light starting to appear in the distance. She was running from something dangerous. But Jack had no idea just how deep this mystery would go. The more he learned, the more he realized that this lost woman was not just anyone. She was someone powerful, someone who could change everything. And Jack's life would never be the same again. Asterisk. A small-town guy finds a lost woman in the woods. She turns out to be a millionaire. Escaping. Asterisk. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. Asterisk. As Jack Turner drove back into Willow Creek with the woman, the weight of the moment started to settle in. The quiet hum of the truck was the only sound as he focused on the road, his mind racing. He kept glancing over at her. The woman sat quietly beside him, her face pale and her eyes distant, as if she was lost in thoughts too heavy to bear. "I'm Jack, by the way," he said, breaking the silence. She turned her gaze toward him, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. "Sophie?" she replied quietly. "Sophie, do you mind if I ask? What happened back there in the woods?" Jack's voice was gentle, but the curiosity in his eyes was hard to hide. Sophie hesitated, staring out the window as if the answers were somewhere in the dark landscape passing by. She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I was running away. I had to get away from them. Jack's grip on the steering wheel tightened, but he didn't press her further. He could sense that she wasn't ready to share the full story yet. You're safe now, he said, more to reassure himself than her. Let's just get you home. You can rest, and we'll figure out what to do next. As they drove into the small town, Sophie's posture seemed to relax slightly, as if the familiar lights and quiet streets offered her a sense of safety. Jack didn't live in the fanciest house, but it was his. It was a modest little cottage with a well-kept yard and a porch that creaked when you stepped on it. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Sophie looked at it with a hint of curiosity as Jack parked the truck. You don't have to stay here, Jack said quickly, noticing her gaze. I mean, I can take you somewhere else, or call someone for you. But for tonight, it's just a place to rest. Sophie nodded silently as she followed him into the house. Jack offered her a seat on the couch, and then went to the kitchen to get her a glass of water. When he returned, she was sitting with her head in her hands, her shoulders trembling. Are you okay? Jack asked softly, kneeling down in front of her. Sophie looked up at him, her eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. I didn't think I'd make it out of there, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't know where else to go. Jack placed the glass of water in her hands, his concern deepening. Who are you running from, Sophie? Sophie hesitated, her eyes darting away from his. It's complicated, she muttered, barely audible. I'm not who I said I was. Jack raised an eyebrow, his confusion growing. What do you mean? She took a deep breath before looking him in the eyes. I'm not just some lost woman. I'm the heiress to a multi-million-dollar company. I ran away because they're trying to control me. They want to force me into a life I don't want. The words hung in the air, heavy with their implications. Jack was stunned. The woman sitting in front of him, a woman he had found lost in the woods, was not just a random stranger. She was someone important, someone with wealth and power. But that didn't change the fact that she was here now, vulnerable and afraid. Jack swallowed hard, trying to process what she had just revealed. You're an heiress? He asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Sophie nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I never wanted any of it, she whispered. All I ever wanted was to live my life on my own terms. But they won't let me. Jack could see the pain in her eyes, and despite the shock of her revelation, he felt an overwhelming urge to help her. She was running from something dangerous, something bigger than both of them. And now, she had nowhere to go. Jack sat down beside her, putting a comforting hand on her shoulder. You don't have to go back, he said firmly. Not if you don't want to. You're safe here. Sophie looked at him, her face a mixture of gratitude and skepticism. You don't understand. They'll come after me. They won't stop until they find me. Jack's jaw clenched. He didn't know the whole story, but he could tell that Sophie's life was in danger, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he wasn't going to let her face it alone. They don't know where you are yet, Jack said, his voice steady. We have time. We'll figure this out. Sophie gave a small, reluctant nod, the faintest spark of hope flickering in her eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to relax, even if just a little. She wasn't alone anymore. Jack wouldn't let her be. As the night settled in, Jack sat by the fire, keeping an eye on Sophie as she drifted off to sleep. The mystery of who she was and who she was running from still lingered. But one thing was clear. Whatever came next, he wasn't going to let her face it alone. Asterisk. A small-town guy finds a lost woman. In the woods, she turns out to be a millionaire. Escaping. Asterisk. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. Asterisk. The next morning, Jack woke up early to find Sophie still asleep on the couch. Her face, though peaceful, was marked with the exhaustion of the past few days. Jack couldn't shake off the sense of responsibility that weighed on him. He had barely known this woman for 24 hours, and yet it felt like she was already becoming a part of his life in ways he couldn't explain. He made a quick breakfast for himself, keeping the noise to a minimum so he wouldn't disturb her. As he ate, his mind wandered to the mysterious situations Sophie was running from. Who were they that she had mentioned? What kind of people would go to such lengths to chase her down? As Jack cleared the dishes, Sophie stirred on the couch, slowly waking up. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, she just stared at the ceiling, clearly trying to piece together where she was. When she saw Jack standing nearby, she sat up with a start. "Good morning," Jack said, offering her a warm smile. "I made some coffee. You can have some if you'd like." Sophie nodded, though there was a wariness in her eyes. She still seemed guarded, but Jack wasn't surprised. She had gone through something unimaginable, and trust didn't come easily. "Thank you," Sophie said softly, sitting up and stretching. "I didn't expect to sleep so long. I guess I was more tired than I thought." Jack watched her closely, noticing how vulnerable she looked. She was trying so hard to hold it together, but it was clear that her past few days had been filled with nothing but fear and uncertainty. "You don't have to explain anything right now," Jack said, sensing her hesitation. "You're safe here. Take your time." Sophie nodded, her lips pressing together as if she was holding back a flood of emotions. Jack poured a cup of coffee for her and handed it over, hoping that the simple gesture would give her some comfort. As Sophie took a sip, Jack sat across from her, wondering if today would finally be the day she opened up more about the danger she was running from. "I can't stay here forever," Sophie said quietly after a long pause, setting her coffee cup down. "They'll find me eventually. I can't just hide forever." Jack's brow furrowed. "You don't have to face this alone," he said, his voice firm. "We can figure something out. We'll find a way to keep you safe." Sophie gave him a tight smile, but her eyes were filled with doubt. "I don't think anyone can protect me from them." Jack's heart ached for her. "Who are they, Sophie?" he asked gently, not wanting to push, but needing to understand. She looked at him for a long moment, as if debating whether or not to trust him with the truth. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "My family. They're not who they seem. They have money. Power more than anyone could imagine. They want to control everything about my life. I tried to leave, but they won't let me go that easily." Jack was silent for a moment, letting her words sink in. Sophie wasn't just any ordinary woman. She was running from a world of wealth and power, one he couldn't even begin to comprehend. "What exactly do they want from you?" Jack asked, his voice low. "Everything," Sophie replied, her eyes darkening. "They want me to follow their rules, marry who they choose, live the life they've planned for me. They've arranged everything, my career, my future, and I can't do it. I can't live that life. So I ran." Jack felt a surge of anger at the thought of someone being forced into a life they didn't want, especially by their own family. He had always believed that everyone should have the freedom to choose their own path. "I don't know what to say," Jack admitted, shaking his head. "But I do know one thing, you don't have to go back to them. Not now, not ever." Sophie looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and doubt. "I don't know what's going to happen," she said, her voice shaky. "But for the first time, I feel like I might actually have a chance to live for myself." Jack reached across the table, taking her hand gently. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you," he promised. "We'll figure this out together." Sophie squeezed his hand in return, the faintest spark of gratitude in her eyes. For the first time since Jack had found her in the woods, Sophie felt a small sense of peace. She wasn't alone anymore, but she knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The people chasing her were relentless, and she had no idea what kind of danger she was truly in. But for now, she was safe. And that was enough. At least for today. Jack stood up, offering her a hand. "Let's take a walk. You've been through a lot. It might help clear your mind." Sophie hesitated, then stood, taking his hand. They stepped outside into the crisp morning air, the sun just beginning to rise over Willow Creek. Jack wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He would protect Sophie, no matter what. They had a long road ahead of them, but for now, they would face it together. Asterisk, asterisk. A small-town guy finds a lost woman in the woods. She turns out to be a millionaire. Escaping, asterisk, asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. Asterisk. As Jack and Sophie walked through the quiet streets of Willow Creek, the weight of the previous days still hung heavily over them. The town, peaceful and familiar, felt like a world away from the danger Sophie had narrowly escaped. The crisp autumn air filled their lungs as they walked side by side, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Jack could see that Sophie was still on edge, her eyes darting around as if she expected someone to be following them. She hadn't said much since their conversation that morning, but Jack could tell she was still processing the truth she had revealed about her past. They reached the small park in the center of town, where a few children were playing in the distance. It was a peaceful place, and for a moment, Sophie allowed herself to relax. She sat down on one of the benches, her hands resting in her lap, and looked out at the trees. "I never thought I'd end up here," Sophie said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "In a small town, far away from everything I've known." Jack sat beside her, his gaze on the ground. "Sometimes, running away isn't about the place. It's about finding somewhere you can finally breathe," he said, trying to comfort her. Sophie turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "Do you really think I can stay here? That I can keep running from them?" Jack met her gaze, his expression serious. "You don't have to run anymore. You've got a chance to start over. But you can't do it alone." Sophie looked away, her eyes clouded with doubt. "What if they find me? What if they come for me and you?" Jack shook his head. "I'm not going to let them hurt you. We'll figure this out." The determination in his voice surprised Sophie. She had seen so many people in her life try to control her, try to tell her what to do. But here, with Jack, it felt different. He wasn't just trying to protect her out of obligation. He genuinely cared. "I can't stay forever," Sophie said, her voice faltering. "I don't want to be a burden to you." Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You're not a burden, Sophie. You're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Sophie looked down at the ground, her fingers nervously twisting in her lap. She had always been so independent, used to handling everything on her own. But now, with Jack by her side, she wasn't sure what to think anymore. Could she really let someone else in? Could she let go of the walls she had built around herself for so long? The silence between them stretched on, filled with the weight of unsaid words. After a moment, Sophie stood up from the bench, brushing the leaves from her pants. "I need to think," she said quietly. Jack watched her for a moment, then nodded. "I understand. I'll be here when you're ready to talk." Sophie walked a few steps away from him, finding a quiet spot near a tree where she could gather her thoughts. Jack stayed where he was, watching her, feeling an overwhelming sense of protectiveness. He didn't know what Sophie's future held, but he knew he wasn't going to let her face it alone. As Sophie stood there, looking out over the park, she thought about the life she had left behind. The wealth, the power, the control that had been imposed on her by her family. She had always been the obedient daughter, the perfect heir to her father's empire, but it had never been the life she wanted. All she ever wanted was to live freely, to make her own choices. Now, as she looked out at the world around her, she realized that for the first time in her life, she had the chance to do just that. But it came with a price. She couldn't hide forever. Her family would come looking for her, and they wouldn't stop until they found her. But for now, she was safe. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Sophie allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for a new beginning. When she turned back to Jack, he was still watching her, waiting patiently. She walked back over to him, taking a deep breath. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." Jack smiled at her, his eyes warm. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just doing what anyone would do." Sophie smiled faintly, feeling a small weight lift off her chest. "No, Jack, you're not just anyone." Jack looked at her, his expression softening. "You don't have to go through this alone. We'll find a way to make things right. I promise." Sophie nodded, feeling a sense of relief she hadn't felt in days. For the first time in a long while, She felt like she wasn't fighting an uphill battle on her own. She wasn't sure what the future held, but with Jack by her side, she knew she wasn't alone anymore. And that, in itself, was enough to give her hope. Asterisk. A small-town guy finds a lost woman in the woods. She turns out to be a millionaire. Escaping. Asterisk. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. Asterisk. The days that followed were a strange mix of normalcy and uncertainty. Jack's small town, with its quiet streets and close-knit community, was a world apart from the life Sophie had known. But despite the stark contrast, Sophie was slowly starting to feel a sense of peace that she had never experienced before. She had always been surrounded by the noise of wealth, expectations, and the constant pressure to be perfect. Here, in Willow Creek, she could breathe. Jack did his best to keep things light, taking her to local cafes and showing her the spots around town that he thought she would enjoy. She had begun to relax, but there was always a sense of urgency in her. Sophie couldn't forget the threat that loomed over her, the family she had fled from. She knew they wouldn't stop searching for her. Jack, on the other hand, didn't show any signs of fear or hesitation. He seemed determined to help Sophie find a way out of this mess, no matter how dangerous it might get. But Sophie couldn't help but wonder, how long would this peaceful life last? Would they find her? Would they drag her back into a life she had fought so hard to escape? One afternoon, as they were sitting in a local diner, Jack tried to lighten the mood. "You know," he said with a grin, "I'm pretty sure the pie here is the best you'll ever taste. You've got to try it." Sophie smiled faintly, her first real smile in days. "I'll take your word for it," she replied, though her mind was elsewhere. Jack noticed the shift in her mood and set his fork down. "Sophie," he said gently, "I know you're worried about your family, but we're going to figure this out, all right?" Sophie looked up at him, her eyes tired. "You don't understand, Jack. They're powerful. They have connections everywhere. I can't hide forever." Jack leaned forward, his voice steady. "You don't have to hide forever. You just need time. Time to think about what you really want. You can't live in fear, not anymore." Sophie's gaze softened as she studied him. She had come to trust him, even though it felt strange. For years, she had been taught that trust was a weakness. But Jack was different. He wasn't trying to manipulate her, control her, or push her into a corner. He was offering her something she had never known: freedom. For the first time in her life, Sophie realized that maybe it was okay to lean on someone. She didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. As the days went by, Jack continued to support her in small ways. He taught her how to take care of herself in a world that wasn't dominated by wealth and status. He encouraged her to explore her interests, to discover who she was outside of the family legacy she had been forced to follow. And slowly, Sophie began to believe that maybe she could start over, maybe she could carve out a new life for herself. But the reality of her situation was never far from her mind. One evening, as they sat on the porch of Jack's house, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Sophie turned to him. "Jack, I don't know how to thank you for everything. I'm scared. So scared that I'm going to drag you into something dangerous." Jack's eyes softened as he met her gaze. "You don't need to thank me, Sophie. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. And whatever happens, I'm not going anywhere." Sophie's heart fluttered at his words, a mixture of gratitude and fear. "I don't want to put you in danger," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack placed a hand on hers, his grip warm and reassuring. "You won't put me in danger. We'll face whatever comes together." Sophie swallowed hard, her emotions overwhelming her. "But what if they come for me? What if they find me here, in this little town?" Jack's expression hardened, his jaw tightening with determination. "Then we fight. We don't run and we don't hide. We stand our ground." Sophie looked at him, seeing something in his eyes that made her believe in him, in them, in the possibility of a future beyond fear. She squeezed his hand in return. "Thank you," she said softly. Jack nodded, his expression steady. You don't have to thank me. Just take it one day at a time." The promise in his words lingered in the cool evening air. Sophie knew there were still many obstacles ahead. But for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could have a future of her own, one where she wasn't controlled by her family, where she wasn't running, and where she wasn't alone. The next morning, Sophie made a decision. It wasn't the kind of decision she would have made in the past, the kind where she would have done what was expected of her. No, this time, it was her choice, and it felt liberating. She wasn't going to wait for someone else to dictate her future. She was going to take control of it herself. And with Jack by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Sophie was no longer afraid of it. Asterisk, asterisk. A small-town guy finds a lost woman in the woods. She turns out to be a millionaire escaping. Asterisk, asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. Asterisk, asterisk. Days turned into weeks, and Sophie slowly started to adapt to life in Willow Creek. Jack's presence in her life was a constant source of comfort. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to let her guard down. She wasn't thinking about the wealthy family that had controlled every aspect of her life. She wasn't thinking about the plans they had for her, the forced marriage, or the legacy they were trying to impose on her. Here, in this small town, she had the chance to simply exist. She even started to believe that maybe she could have a future of her own. But the danger never fully left her mind. Sophie knew that her family's reach was far and wide, and no matter how far she ran, they would eventually find her. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. As the days passed, Jack continued to show her the small joys of everyday life. He took her to the local farmer's market, where they picked out fresh produce and joked about their favorite recipes. They spent evenings sitting on the porch, watching the sunset, talking about everything and nothing. Sophie even began to feel like she belonged in Willow Creek, a place that had once seemed so foreign to her. But the constant fear lingered. She couldn't shake the thought that one day, everything she was building here would be ripped away. One evening, after a long day of helping Jack with a project around his house, Sophie was sitting on the couch, staring out the window at the dimming sky. Jack walked into the room, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He noticed the look on her face. "Sophie," he said, sitting down beside her. "What's going on? You've been quiet lately." Sophie turned to him, her eyes filled with doubt and fear. "I can't keep doing this," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when I know my family is out there, looking for me. What if they find me here, Jack? What if they come for me? And all of this is for nothing." Jack's heart sank. He had known this day would come. He had known that Sophie would eventually confront the reality of her situation. He set the coffee mugs down on the table and took her hand in his. "Sophie, listen to me. I'm not going to let them take you back. Not after everything you've been through. We'll find a way out of this, I promise." Sophie's eyes searched his face, looking for something, anything, to hold on to. "You don't know what they're capable of," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't want to drag you into this mess. You deserve a peaceful life. I'm a danger to you, Jack. I'm dragging you into something you can't even begin to understand." Jack shook his head firmly, squeezing her hand. "You're not dragging me into anything. You're giving me a reason to fight. You don't have to do this alone. Whatever happens, we're in this together." Sophie's heart ached with the weight of his words. For the first time since she had run away, she allowed herself to believe that she might actually have a chance at happiness. "But what do we do now?" she asked, the fear still evident in her voice. Jack sat back, thinking for a moment. "We can't stay here forever," he said. "But we don't have to run either. We need to find a way to protect you, to make sure they can't find you again." Sophie nodded slowly. She knew Jack was right. She couldn't keep running, but she couldn't stay here either, not with the danger so close. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. "What if we go to the authorities?" Sophie asked, unsure. "Tell them everything?" Jack's expression darkened slightly. I don't think that would work. They have too many connections, too many resources. They'd find a way to silence anyone who tries to help us. No, we need to think smarter. We need to get ahead of them, make sure they can't track you. Sophie's mind raced as she processed what Jack was saying. She had never thought of her situation like that, never thought about outsmarting her family. But Jack was right. If she didn't take control now, she might lose everything she had worked so hard to escape. She looked at him, determination beginning to form in her eyes. What do we do next? She asked, her voice steady. Jack smiled softly, his grip on her hand tightening. First, we figure out how to get you out of here safely. Then we work on a plan that makes sure they can't follow you. And Sophie, no matter what happens, we'll make sure you have a life that's yours. A life where you get to make the decisions. Sophie felt a wave of relief wash over her. For the first time since she had arrived in Willow Creek, she could see a way forward. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be obstacles along the way. But with Jack by her side, she felt like she could face anything. She wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in her life, she had a choice. And that choice was hers to make. Together, Jack and Sophie began to make plans. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. The life Sophie wanted, the life she deserved, was within her reach. But first, they had to make sure nothing and no one could take it away. A small town guy finds a lost woman in the woods. She turns out to be a millionaire. Escaping, ***. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. It had been a week since Sophie and Jack decided to take control of her future. And though the days had passed quietly, the tension between them and the danger still lurking outside had only grown. Sophie was trying to stay hopeful, trying to believe that with Jack's help, she could escape her family's grasp for good. But she had moments of doubt, moments where she wondered if they would ever be able to truly break free. Jack, however, remained determined. He refused to let the fear take hold, even when Sophie seemed to lose hope. He spent the days researching ways to protect her, talking to people in town, and setting up a plan that he hoped would keep them one step ahead of her family. But the more he looked into it, the more he realized how much he didn't know. Sophie's family wasn't just wealthy, they were powerful, and their reach extended far beyond the city limits of Willow Creek. The thought weighed heavily on Jack, but he refused to back down. He wasn't going to let Sophie face this alone. One morning, as they sat at the kitchen table, going over their plans, Sophie's phone buzzed. She had kept it turned off for most of the week, but Jack had convinced her to turn it on just in case they needed to reach someone. Hesitantly, she picked it up, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the name on the screen. "It's my father," she said, her voice low. Jack's heart sank. "Don't answer it," he said, his voice firm. Sophie hesitated, her finger hovering over the screen. "What if it's important? What if they know where I am?" Jack shook his head. "You don't need to talk to him, Sophie. We're taking control of this. No more running, no more hiding." Sophie let out a breath and turned the phone off, her fingers trembling. The weight of her family's expectations was heavy on her shoulders, and it was hard to let go of the fear that they could find her at any moment. "I'm scared, Jack," she admitted quietly. "What if they never stop looking for me? What if I never get to live my life the way I want to?" Jack reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You're going to live the life you want, Sophie. We'll make sure of it. And as for them, they don't get to control you anymore." Sophie looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. For the first time, she believed him. For the first time, she could see a future where she wasn't being controlled by her family, where she could be free. The next few days were spent putting their plan into motion. Jack made arrangements for Sophie to leave Willow Creek temporarily, to lay low in a nearby town where no one knew her. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Jack made sure to get all the details in place: secure travel, a place for Sophie to stay, and a backup plan in case things went wrong. Sophie was hesitant at first, unsure if it was the right thing to do, but Jack reassured her, reminding her that it was only temporary. She had to get out of town, away from her family's influence, to give herself a chance to think clearly. The night before Sophie was supposed to leave, Jack took her out for a quiet dinner at a small diner in town. It was the first time in a long while that they had just been able to enjoy each other's company without the looming fear of what was to come. They talked about everything and nothing, the way normal people did. And for a while, it felt like Sophie was just a regular person, not someone being chased by her family. As they finished their meal, Jack looked at her, his eyes serious. "You're not alone in this, Sophie. I'm with you, every step of the way." Sophie smiled softly, the warmth in her heart growing. "Thank you, Jack." "For everything," Jack smiled back, his hand brushing against hers. "We're in this together." The next morning, Sophie packed a small bag, the one that she had brought with her when she first arrived in Willow Creek. It wasn't much, just a few clothes and personal items, but it felt like a step toward reclaiming her life. Jack drove her to the bus station, his hand resting on her shoulder as they sat in silence. It was a bittersweet moment. Sophie knew this was necessary, but she also knew it was the beginning of something new, something unknown. As the bus pulled away, Jack stood at the station, watching her go. Sophie looked out the window, her heart heavy with emotion. She was scared, but she was also hopeful. For the first time in her life, she was taking control of her future. And Jack was the reason she believed she could make it through this. She wasn't alone anymore. And no matter what her family did, no matter how hard they tried to find her, Sophie knew she had the strength to start over. She was going to live the life she had always wanted. And this time, it was going to be her choice. Asterisk. A small town guy finds a lost woman in the woods. She turns out to be a millionaire. Escaping. Asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. Asterisk. Sophie's departure had left Jack with a sense of emptiness he couldn't quite shake off. The days without her felt long, and though he kept himself busy with work and small tasks around the house, there was a lingering silence that haunted him. He had always been a man of action, someone who was used to solving problems. But this situation was different. Sophie was out there, somewhere, and Jack was left wondering if she was okay, if she was safe. As the days passed, Jack received a call from Sophie. Her voice, though strained, sounded relieved. "Jack, I'm okay," she said. "I'm in a small town, far enough from Willow Creek, and no one knows who I am here. I'm safe, for now." Jack's heart lifted at her words. "I'm glad you're safe," he said, his voice filled with relief. "But I miss you." Sophie paused for a moment, the quiet on the other end of the line telling him she was thinking. "I miss you too, Jack," she said softly. "But I don't know what comes next. I don't know how long I can stay here, hiding from them." Jack's grip on the phone tightened. "You don't have to hide anymore. We'll figure this out together. I'm not giving up on you, Sophie. I won't let you go through this alone." There was a long silence before Sophie spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do, Jack. I don't want to go back to that life. I don't want to go back to the family who controls everything. But I'm scared." Jack's heart broke for her. He could hear the fear in her voice, the weight of the burden she was carrying. "You don't have to go back, Sophie," Jack said firmly. "We'll find a way. You can have the life you want. We just need to stay one step ahead." Sophie's breath was shaky. "But they won't stop looking for me. They'll find me, Jack. It's only a matter of time." Jack sat down on the porch steps, his mind racing. He had promised Sophie that he would help her, that he would protect her, but the truth was, he didn't know how to fight her family's power. They were ruthless. They had everything at their disposal: money, influence, connections. But Jack wasn't about to let that stop him. "Sophie, I've been thinking," Jack said, his voice steady, despite the uncertainty swirling inside him. "We can't keep running, but we don't have to go back to your family either. There's another way. We'll fight this together, on our terms." Sophie was quiet for a long moment, the only sound on the other end of the line, the soft rustle of her breathing. "What do you mean?" she finally asked. Jack took a deep breath. "I've been talking to some people in town, trying to figure out what we can do. We need to make sure your family can't find you. We need to take control of the narrative. Make sure that no one knows where you are or what you're doing." Sophie's voice was tinged with hope. "You think we can really do that?" Jack smiled, though Sophie couldn't see it. "I know we can. We'll go public with the truth, Sophie. We'll expose your family for who they really are. We'll make sure they can't keep manipulating you, controlling you. You have a voice, and it's time for you to use it." There was a brief pause before Sophie spoke again, her voice stronger this time. "You're right. I've spent my whole life letting them decide my future. It's time to take it back." Jack felt a rush of pride for her. "That's the spirit," he said. "We'll figure this out step by step, and you'll finally have the chance to live the life you want." Sophie's laugh was small but genuine. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Jack. You've made me believe again." Jack stood up, his determination solidifying. "You're not alone anymore, Sophie. We're in this together." They talked for a few more minutes, strategizing their next moves, but it was clear to Jack that they were both ready for whatever came next. They couldn't hide forever, but they didn't need to. It was time to fight. It was time to take control of Sophie's life, and Jack was ready to stand by her side every step of the way. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Sophie felt a sense of hope. With Jack's unwavering support, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she could break free from her family's grip. She wasn't going to run anymore. She was going to fight, and Jack would be there, right beside her, making sure she didn't have to fight alone. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Asterisk. A small-town guy finds a lost woman in the woods. She turns out to be a millionaire. Escaping. Asterisk. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. Asterisk. Sophie's heart raced as she sat in the small diner, her hands gripping the edge of the table. She had just finished speaking with her lawyer on the phone, and everything had changed. The plan they had put in motion, the quiet escape from her family's control, was no longer enough. The legal threats had started, and Sophie knew that her family was not just going to give up. They had the resources, the connections, and the power to crush anyone who stood in their way, and that included her. Jack could see the fear in her eyes as she hung up the phone. "What's going on, Sophie?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself before she spoke. "My family's lawyer just called," she said, her voice trembling. "They're not going to let this go. They're threatening to take everything my inheritance, everything I own, and they're going after you too, Jack. They said if I don't return, they'll make sure you're dragged into this mess." Jack's jaw tightened. He knew Sophie's family was powerful, but hearing it like this, so directly, made him realize just how deep the trouble went. He reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. "Sophie, they can threaten all they want, but we're not giving up. Not now, not ever." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "But I can't fight them, Jack. I'm not strong enough to take on my family. They're too powerful." Jack shook his head, his voice firm. "You're not alone. You don't have to fight them on your own. We'll figure this out together. We'll find a way to beat them." Sophie stared at him for a long moment, as if searching for any sign of doubt in his words. But there was none. Jack believed in her. He believed in them. And for the first time in weeks, Sophie allowed herself to believe in it too. They had come this far, and they couldn't stop now. They had to push forward, no matter how impossible it seemed. "What do we do next?" Sophie asked, her voice steady now, though the weight of the situation was still heavy on her shoulders. Jack stood up, his mind already working. "We need to make sure your family can't touch us," he said. "I've been talking to a few people, and I think we can expose what they've been doing. They've been using their wealth and influence to control everything, and it's time the world knew about it." Sophie's eyes widened. Expose them? How? Jack looked down at her, his expression serious. We're going to take everything public. We can't hide anymore. The more we try to stay in the shadows, the stronger they become. If we go public with what they've done, they won't have the same power. The truth is the one thing they can't control. Sophie sat back, her mind spinning. She had never considered going public with her family's secrets. For years, she had been taught to keep everything behind closed doors, to protect the family's reputation at all costs. But now, with Jack by her side, she saw another path. Do you really think that will work? She asked, her voice uncertain. Jack nodded. I do. And even if it doesn't work right away, we won't be hiding anymore. They won't be able to scare us into submission. Sophie's heart swelled with emotion. Jack wasn't just fighting for her. He was fighting with her. Together, they could take on her family and the world they had created. All right, she said, her voice gaining strength. Let's do it. Let's expose them. Jack smiled, his confidence infectious. We'll start with the media. We'll get the truth out there. And once it's out, there's no going back. Sophie nodded, her resolve firming up. She wasn't going to let her family control her anymore. She wasn't going to let them use fear to keep her trapped. As they sat there, making plans and talking through the details, Sophie felt something she hadn't felt in years' hope. The road ahead was uncertain, and there were still plenty of challenges to face. But for the first time, she felt like she had a real chance to take control of her life. As Jack reached across the table and squeezed her hand, she realized that she wasn't just escaping her family's grip. She was finally starting to live her life the way she wanted. And with Jack by her side, she knew that they could take on whatever came next. They weren't just fighting for her future, they were fighting for a life where Sophie was free. Free to choose, free to live, and free to be who she really was. Together, they were going to fight for that freedom, and they weren't going to stop until they had it. Asterisk, asterisk. A small-town guy finds a lost woman in the woods. She turns out to be a millionaire. Escaping, asterisk, asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. Asterisk, asterisk. The days following their decision to expose Sophie's family were filled with nervous anticipation. Jack and Sophie worked tirelessly, preparing every detail for what they were about to do. The plan was risky, and they both knew it. But there was no turning back now. Sophie was no longer willing to hide in the shadows, and Jack was determined to stand by her side, no matter what it took. They had decided to take their story to the press. It wasn't an easy choice for Sophie. For years, her family had taught her that their image was everything, that their wealth and power should remain untouchable. But Jack had convinced her that the truth was more powerful than any lie her family could create. The night before they planned to go public, Sophie sat on the couch, her hands nervously twisting a piece of cloth as she looked out the window at the stars. Jack sat beside her, offering a quiet presence, giving her the space she needed. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. Sophie knew that Jack was waiting for her to speak, to share whatever doubts or fears were clouding her mind. After a long silence, she finally turned to him. "What if this doesn't work?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they just shut us down, make it all go away? What if we're not strong enough?" Jack looked at her with a calm intensity. "We are strong enough. Together, we've got this." Sophie sighed, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she admitted. "I just want to be free. I don't want to ruin everything. But I can't go back to that life. I can't keep pretending." Jack reached out, taking her hand in his. "You don't have to keep pretending. You don't have to go back. And we're not doing this to hurt anyone. We're doing it to take back control of your life. You deserve to live it on your terms, Sophie." Sophie's eyes softened as she looked at him, gratitude flooding her heart. "Thank you," she said quietly, squeezing his hand. Jack smiled at her. "We're in this together, and no matter what happens, you'll always have me." The next morning, they met with a reporter who had agreed to help them get their story out. Sophie's hands shook as they entered the office of the local news outlet, but Jack kept his arm around her, offering the quiet support she needed. They sat down with the reporter, who listened attentively as they explained Sophie's situation, everything that had led to this point, and the threats her family had made. Sophie spoke carefully, but Jack could see the strength in her words. She wasn't just telling her story anymore, she was reclaiming it. As they finished their conversation with the reporter, Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did great," he said softly. Sophie gave him a small smile, though the nervous tension was still evident on her face. "I just hope we're doing the right thing," she said. Jack nodded. "We are. The truth will come out, and once it does, we won't be hiding anymore." "You'll be free, Sophie. You'll finally be free." They left the office together, stepping out into the bright afternoon Sunday. The weight of the decision was still heavy, but there was also a sense of relief, as if a burden had been lifted, if only for a moment. The next few days felt like a blur. The story was published, and the fallout was immediate. The media storm that followed was intense, with headlines splashed across news outlets, social media buzzing with speculation, and people across the country commenting on the scandal. Sophie's family tried to control the narrative, of course, but the more they tried to suppress the truth, the more it spread. The public outcry was overwhelming, and Sophie's name was now tied to the story in ways she had never imagined. At first, Sophie was terrified. She watched the news, reading the articles, hearing the whispers of people who didn't know the full story. The pressure mounted, and it felt as though the world was watching her every move. But slowly, something inside her shifted. She wasn't just hiding anymore. She wasn't the quiet, obedient daughter. She was taking control, and that felt powerful. Jack remained by her side through it all, offering unwavering support. Every time Sophie faltered, every time the weight of everything became too much to bear, Jack reminded her why they were doing this. They were fighting for her future, and it was a fight worth having. One day, as the media frenzy started to die down and Sophie's family's control began to slip, Jack took Sophie aside. They were sitting on the porch, the soft sound of wind rustling the trees around them. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You're free." Sophie looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice thick with gratitude. Jack smiled at her, his heart swelling with affection. "We did this together," he said. And in that moment, Sophie realized he was right. This wasn't just her fight, it was theirs. Together, they had taken on her family, exposed the truth, and fought for a future where she could finally be herself. She wasn't just free from her family's control. She was free to live the life she had always wanted, and she knew that no matter what came next, she wasn't alone. With Jack by her side, Sophie believed anything was possible. ***. A small-town guy finds a lost woman in the woods. She turns out to be a millionaire. Escaping... Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. Weeks had passed since Sophie and Jack had gone public with her family's secrets, and although the storm of media attention was beginning to settle, the repercussions were still unfolding. Sophie had learned to navigate her newfound freedom, but there were still moments when the weight of her past tried to pull her back into a life she no longer wanted. Her family was furious, using every resource at their disposal to try to regain control, but Sophie was resolute. She refused to let them dictate her future any longer. Jack was by her side every step of the way, unwavering in his support. He had become her anchor, the one person who reminded her that she wasn't alone. Together, they worked on building a life where Sophie could truly be herself. They spent the days planning for the future, creating new dreams that didn't involve the family's wealth and influence. They explored the small town, finding new places to enjoy, and Jack continued to teach Sophie the joys of living a simple life. Sophie found herself laughing more than she had in years, a sound she hadn't realized she'd missed. But even in the peace of their life together, the truth that Sophie's family hadn't given up on her lingered. Sophie knew that she had made a powerful enemy, and they wouldn't stop until they had her back under their control. It was a quiet morning when the first real sign of trouble came. Sophie was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, when she heard a knock at the door. Jack, who was in the other room, immediately stood up, sensing the change in the air. Sophie's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected anyone, not after all the chaos. When Jack opened the door, he was met with a familiar face, Sophie's old family lawyer. "Jack, Sophie," the lawyer said, his voice low. "I need to speak with you both." Sophie's stomach turned, but she kept her composure. She stood up from the table, her eyes locked with Jack's. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice steady. The lawyer looked at her, his expression sympathetic. "Your family is offering a settlement. They're willing to make a deal, one that will ensure your future and protect you from further legal action." Sophie's pulse quickened. "What kind of deal?" she asked, already feeling the weight of the old life closing in on her. The lawyer hesitated before speaking again. "Your family is willing to drop all charges, and in exchange, they want you to return, to take your place as the rightful heir. They're offering you control, but they want you to come back into the fold to fulfill your duties." Jack stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "What's the catch?" The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "There's no catch, per se. But they expect you to honor the family legacy. They want to control the narrative, and they want you back in their world. You'll be protected, Sophie, but only if you come back and follow the path they've set for you." Sophie's heart raced as the weight of the decision hit her all over again. She had fought so hard to escape that life, to free herself from the control and manipulation, and now her family was offering her a way back on their terms. She felt torn, the pull of her past life conflicting with the life she had built with Jack. Jack could see the conflict in her eyes. He knew how hard this decision was for Sophie. He could feel the tension in the room as she stood frozen, trying to process everything the lawyer had said. "You don't have to make this decision right now," Jack said gently, his hand resting on Sophie's shoulder. "You've already chosen a different life. This offer, it's just another way for them to keep control. Don't let them fool you." Sophie looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "But what if it's my only way out? What if this is the only way to finally end this?" Jack shook his head, his voice resolute. "You've already ended it, Sophie. You've broken free. Don't let them put you back in a cage." The lawyer remained silent, watching the exchange between the two of them. Sophie's mind was racing, but she knew deep down that Jack was right. She had fought for her freedom, and she couldn't give it up now, not for anything. "Thank you, but no," Sophie said, her voice steady and strong. "I'm not going back, not to that life. I'm choosing my own future, and it's not one that revolves around their control." The lawyer looked disappointed but nodded. "I'll let them know," he said quietly, before turning and leaving the house. As the door closed behind him, Sophie let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. The weight of the decision felt heavy in her chest, but she knew it was the right one. Jack wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. Sophie leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his embrace. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. She wasn't going back to her family's world. She was going forward with Jack, toward a future she could build on her own terms. And for the first time, Sophie believed that no matter what came next, she was strong enough to face it. With Jack by her side, she was ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would make their own future, free from the past. Asterisk, asterisk. A small-town guy finds a lost woman in the woods. She turns out to be a millionaire escaping. Asterisk, asterisk. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's get into today's story. Asterisk, asterisk. As the days turned into weeks, Sophie and Jack's life in Willow Creek seemed to settle into a peaceful rhythm. The storm that had once clouded Sophie's life, the relentless pursuit of her family, the pressure to conform was slowly beginning to feel like a distant memory. But despite the calm on the surface, both Sophie and Jack knew that the threat of her family's influence was never truly gone. It lingered in the back of their minds like a shadow that wouldn't quite disappear. Sophie had spent years in the grip of her family's expectations, a puppet in their game of power and control. Now that she had broken free, there were moments when she allowed herself to feel the weight of her newfound independence. Jack had been her rock through all of it, providing not just support, but a sense of stability she had never known before. They had started to make plans for the future, small ones, like finding a house they could call their own and making a life in Willow Creek, away from the clutches of the past. Yet, deep down, Sophie knew that the fight wasn't over. One afternoon, Sophie was sitting in the small park near their home, taking in the fresh air and the peaceful surroundings. She had come to love the simplicity of this life, the quiet moments she never thought she would have. Jack had gone out to run errands, giving her some time alone. As she sat on the bench, Sophie's phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but something in her gut told her it was important. Hesitating for only a moment, she picked up. "Sophie?" The voice on the other end was familiar, but it wasn't Jack. Her heart sank. It was her brother, James. "James?" Sophie replied, her voice shaky. She hadn't heard from him since she left, and hearing his voice again brought back a flood of memories she'd tried so hard to escape. "Sophie, I know things have been difficult," James said, his tone softer than she remembered. "But you need to come home, Father is not well. He wants to see you." Sophie's stomach churned. This wasn't just an offer to reconcile, it was a trap. She could feel it in her bones. "James, I've made my decision," Sophie said firmly, her voice steady. "I'm not coming back. I'm done with that life." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You can't keep running forever, Sophie. You're part of the family. You belong with us." His words cut deeper than she cared to admit. It was exactly what she had heard so many times before, the constant reminder that her place was always defined by them, never by her. "I belong with Jack now," Sophie replied, her voice gaining strength. "I belong to myself. I'm not going back to that life." James sighed, and there was a trace of frustration in his voice. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you'll regret this. You can't escape who you are." Sophie's heart raced, but she didn't let his words shake her. "Maybe I can't escape who I was, but I can choose who I want to be." There was a silence before James spoke again, his voice resigned. "You're making a mistake, Sophie, but I'll give you some time. Just know that you're always welcome back." With that, the line went dead. Sophie sat there, her heart pounding. She had known that her family wouldn't just let her go. But hearing James's words, his veiled threats, his manipulation reminded her of just how far she had come. She wasn't that girl anymore. She wasn't going back to the life they had planned for her. As Jack returned home later that afternoon, he noticed the look on Sophie's face. She had been quiet, lost in thought, and he could tell something was weighing on her. He sat beside her on the bench, taking her hand in his. "What happened?" he asked gently. Sophie took a deep breath before speaking. "It was James. He wants me to come back. Father is apparently not well. He's trying to manipulate me again." Jack's expression hardened, but he didn't say anything at first. He simply held her hand and listened, knowing how difficult this was for her. "I'm not going back, Jack," Sophie said quietly, her voice strong despite the turmoil inside. "I'm done. I've already made my choice, and nothing they say will change that." Jack nodded, his grip tightening around her hand. "I'm proud of you, Sophie. You've come so far. And you don't have to do this alone. I'm right here with you." Sophie looked at him, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She had spent so much of her life fighting for freedom, for a chance to be herself. But with Jack beside her, she realized that the battle wasn't over. It wasn't just about escaping her family, it was about building something new, something that was truly hers. "Thank you, Jack," she whispered, her heart full. "I don't think I could have made it this far without you." Jack leaned in and kissed her forehead. "You don't have to thank me. We're in this together, Sophie. Always." As they sat together in the quiet park, Sophie realized something profound. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding from her past. She was living her life on her own terms, and with Jack by her side, she knew that she could face whatever came next. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Sophie felt ready to embrace it, free from the past, and finally in control of her own destiny. Asterisk, asterisk. A small-town guy finds a lost woman in the woods. She turns out to be a millionaire escaping. Asterisk, asterisk. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. Asterisk, asterisk. As the months passed, Sophie and Jack settled into their new life together, away from the shadows of her past. The quiet town of Willow Creek had become a refuge, and every day seemed like a new chapter in a story they were writing together. Sophie found peace in the little things, morning coffee on the porch, long walks through the woods, and the comfort of Jack's steady presence beside her. She had spent so long feeling like a prisoner in her own life, but now she felt free. Free to choose, free to dream, and free to live on her own terms. Yet, even as they built their new life, the legacy of Sophie's past still loomed over her. Her family had not stopped trying to reclaim control, but Sophie was no longer afraid of them. She had faced her deepest fears, and with Jack's unwavering support, she had stood tall. The media storm that had once threatened to consume her had begun to settle. Sophie's story had been heard, and the world knew the truth. It had been a hard fight, but in the end, she had emerged victorious. Her family, though still powerful, could no longer manipulate her. They could no longer control her future. Sophie had learned to take back the pieces of herself they had stolen, and she had rebuilt her life. One afternoon, Jack and Sophie sat in their cozy living room, the warmth of the fire flickering in the hearth. The soft glow of the setting sun filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. Sophie leaned back in her chair, a peaceful smile on her face as she looked at Jack. "I can't believe how far we've come," she said, her voice filled with awe. Jack reached over, taking her hand in his. "We've come a long way," he agreed, "and we're just getting started." Sophie chuckled softly, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I never thought I'd have a life like this. I never thought I'd have the chance to just be." Jack smiled warmly at her. "You've always had the chance, Sophie. You just needed to see it for yourself." Sophie's eyes glistened with emotion as she looked at Jack. He had been her anchor through everything. And now, with him by her side, she knew she could face anything. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Jack squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to thank me. We're in this together, always." As they sat there, the weight of their journey finally began to lift. Sophie had reclaimed her life, her independence, and her happiness. But most of all, she had found the strength to choose her own path. The man sitting beside her wasn't just her protector. He was her partner, her equal. Together, they had overcome every obstacle, and together, they would face whatever the future held. The phone rang, breaking the quiet stillness of the room. Sophie glanced at it, her stomach tightening as she saw the number on the screen. It was a call from her lawyer. For a moment, she hesitated, but then, with a deep breath, she picked up the phone. "Sophie," her lawyer said, "I've just received confirmation. Your family has officially accepted defeat. They've agreed to drop all claims. You are free." Sophie's heart skipped a beat as the words sank in. She looked at Jack, a smile slowly spreading across her face. "We did it," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jack stood up, pulling her into his arms. "You did it," he said, kissing the top of her head. "You've earned this." As they held each other, the weight of everything that had come before began to fade into the background. They had fought for their future, and they had won. Sophie was no longer the person she had been, the scared, trapped woman who had once felt she had no choice. She was free, and she was ready to live her life, her own life. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Sophie felt a sense of peace. She was no longer running from her past. She had embraced it, learned from it, and now, she was looking forward to the future. And with Jack by her side, she knew that no matter what challenges came their way, they would face them together. The future was theirs to create, and Sophie was no longer afraid to embrace it. Together, they had found their way. And together, they would walk into whatever came next, side by side. In this captivating tale of resilience and redemption, Sophie, a young woman who escapes from her powerful family, learns to reclaim her life after being caught in the web of wealth and control. This story is filled with twists and turns, showcasing the struggles and triumphs of breaking free from oppressive expectations. Sophie's journey from a trapped heiress to a woman taking charge of her own destiny is an inspiring example of strength and self-discovery. Her encounter with Jack, a kind-hearted mechanic, sparks a relationship that changes both of their lives, as they fight against the forces trying to pull her back into the life she fled. Their story is one of courage, love, and the pursuit of freedom, all set against the backdrop of small-town simplicity. As they face constant challenges, they realize that the power to change their future lies within them. This is not just another ordinary escape story, it's one of the most captivating millionaire stories, where a woman rises above her family's control and embraces the freedom she deserves. In the end, Sophie chooses to fight for her life, her future, and her love, proving that no matter how dark the past may be, it's possible to walk into the light with the right person by your side. Through her story, Sophie shows us that anyone, no matter their background, can rewrite their narrative and take back control. This is one of those unforgettable millionaire stories that highlights how love and determination can overcome the deepest challenges and set the stage for a life worth living. As Sophie and Jack face their future together, they prove that true freedom comes not just from escaping your past, but from finding the strength to redefine your life on your own terms. This is a story that will inspire anyone who has ever dreamed of a better life, reminding us that no matter where we come from, we all have the power to change our fate. One of the most touching millionaire stories, this tale is about courage, transformation, and the unbreakable bond between two people who dared to choose their own path.